Should children be able to undergo gender-changing procedures without parental consent? I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. We're back with another controversial topic again. This time it revolves around transgender children and whether or not they should be able to undergo procedures without parental consent. So, the Toronto Star put out an article today titled "Transgender Teen Has Right to Transition Despite Father's Opposition, BC's Appeal Court Rules." So, BC's top court has reasserted the right of young people to undergo hormone therapy despite a parent's objection to that. Now, the gist of the lawsuit involves a family. There is a 15-year-old biological daughter, that is a girl, who wants to begin treatment to become a boy. There's a mother who supports that, and a father who does not. That's a pretty, you could say, high-tension family situation. The question then becomes, do children need parental permission to begin things like hormone treatment? The father says, yes, you do need my permission. The child says no. I find this oddly ironic, first of all, because the answer to that question, when compared with other similar questions of permission, is quite obvious. Think about it. We don't allow children to even go on field trips without parental consent. They can't even sign themselves out of school or class without consent. You can't even buy M-rated video games without consent. You can't go to a rated R movie. The list goes on and on. But you can make life-altering choices when it comes to procedures that will change the fabric of your very identity. Choices that are hard to reverse and are often permanent. Seems reasonable, right? That's what the courts think. So, back to the article. The father in question, who does not support his daughter, now it's his son, and the procedure that she wants to go through, had a charge brought against him that was later dropped. The courts tried to claim that he committed family violence by refusing to acknowledge his teenage child's gender. My question is, what does that even mean? That you refuse to acknowledge his child's gender? He was in fact acknowledging a gender, just not the one that you like. He was using a biological foreground to come to his conclusion. He referred to her as she, as his daughter. What he did was to refuse to use his child's chosen gender. So it's not like he's not even acknowledging any type of gender at all. He has a valid basis as to why he believes something, but that's not acceptable anymore. But the charge of family violence due to that, it's simply illogical, and it's no wonder it was dropped because it opens the door to so many consequences that, along with being simply asinine, only a complete idiot could view it like that. This charge of family violence, it presumes that refusing to succumb to your child's subjective visions of themselves is a crime, something that you can get in trouble in the courts for. Now, I knew a kid who thought he was a werewolf. If his father said, "Look, son, you're actually not a wolf, you're a human," I can easily imagine a twisted reality where that becomes a case for family violence for refusing to acknowledge the child's anatomy or something like that. Newsflash, these are children that we are talking about. Do the courts not understand how the minds of young people work? We've all been young and we can all relate to it. They are exposed to peer pressure every day from a variety of sources. They are easily influenced and they think spontaneously. Very often they cannot think about consequences for the actions that they choose. It's almost as if the courts are pretending that we're dealing with the peak of rationality at these ages or something like that. It's not the case, and the courts have seemingly lost their mind. When you are an adult and have some development under your belt, then go for it. Transition, do whatever you want, whatever you wish, live and let live. I have no problems with that and the individual's right to freedom, but as a child, the ballgame is very different and there is no acknowledgement of that fact here. So, the biological girl in question is now 15 years old, but has supposedly identified as a boy since age 11. They wanted to begin this hormonal treatment in 2018, but the father said no. Obviously, this child is suffering from gender dysphoria. She was born as a she, but now for some reason believes that she is actually a he. So the issue escalated and ended up in the court system, where, as you know, anything can happen. This article then writes that the three judges called the father's refusal to accept his son's gender identity to be troublesome. Note their usage of son as well in their quote. This is coming from high-ranking judges in our country. It's obviously them setting the bar at a peculiar place. One of the dogmas that they're pushing for and seem to have acknowledged on their own is that the layer between genders, between male and female, is a declaration and that alone. That is the only distinction. It's simply a matter of what you believe. The child said that they are a boy, and now they are one. That's it, case closed. There's no need for any scientific rationale, nothing. Just your declaration. Now, doesn't that sound convenient and troublesome? They use troublesome to describe the father's actions, but to me, their ruling and what they're doing is the real trouble. Then, if you refute this, if you refute what they're talking about, you end up on the brink of a legal trial of family violence. Two things can be true at once in this situation, though, aside from that, insanity. So first, it's clear the child is going through a rough time. To believe you are something and to have your family reject you is quite hard. The child wants to be accepted, and that's their fundamental wish here. I understand that. It's unfortunate and I feel for them, but the answer isn't to rush into a procedure based on gender dysphoria at age 15. How presumptuous to boil this entire debacle down to that. Taking hormones is not going to solve the underlying issues at hand here. It seems to me it's about acceptance and feeling welcome in your own body. Doing this is not going to produce the outcome that they desire in the household. The father who is opposed to this is not all of a sudden going to open his mind because he's been forced to by the court. That is where debate comes in handy, where you can rationally provide an argument as to why he is wrong, but we haven't taken that approach. We're taking the approach of legally shutting down opposition with no good reason at all. Then you wonder why people can't accept it, because you have not laid out an adequate argument. It's simple and it's debate 101. The courts are failing at that. It's still unclear to me from the court's perspective why they think it's a good idea to let children have the ability to make these changes to themselves. And I'm going to touch on some interesting stats in a second, but first, the fact of the matter here is you are a minor. We're talking about children, and children are not known to have the best judgment. The issue isn't sympathy. It's preventing catastrophic rulings from coming out of the court and influencing our society. Here are some stats that nobody likes to talk about. So, SciPost.org. They highlighted some findings from trans studies, the few that have been conducted. One study followed up on 127 trans children. 56 of them said they were no longer transgender. That's 44%. Then 47 said that they were still trans. That is 37%. The rest didn't respond. So look at those numbers there. More children actually end up changing their mind. That's a large chunk of kids who later in life realize that they aren't really trans. They were just suffering from a form of gender dysphoria at that particular point in time. Now, if you're one of those kids and you perform an invasive surgery or ingest hormones, some of those changes that you induce are going to be hard to reverse, and it will suck for you if you are one of those 44% who later on realizes that you are not actually trans. The issue here, and the idiocy of the courts, is that they seem to believe that as soon as you get the thought in your mind that you should transition, you should just go ahead and do it. Even if you are 15 and not thinking clearly, you can't even wait until you're an adult to make that choice for yourself. You should do it right away, right now, and don't worry about the consequences. Don't worry about the research that tells us that a large chunk of people end up changing their mind. Any number of 15-year-olds would have made regrettable choices if allowed to. This is an idiotic ruling to suggest that children should have the power to make these calls for themselves. They're just not capable. It's why you can't enter into a legally binding agreement with a minor without parental consent, because they are not at a level where they can process and understand these stipulations. I can't believe we're actually having this discussion here and the courts are against what I'm saying. Now, you may say, oh, I'm only citing one study, and I will say that's correct. There are some more out there with similar findings, but I agree that we need more data. That's another problem, actually, because these judges are acting as if we have all the facts here, and clearly we do not. Organizations can't even objectively do research because of the politics of the topic. The CBC even canceled a documentary about trans children because activists found it transphobic. Yeah, okay. Are you sure we haven't crossed a line where criticism is automatically transphobic now, or we can't even explore the topic fully, we are eons away from the truth of the matter because we cannot talk freely about it. I have no problem with somebody being trans, but forcing other people to buy into the ideology, that's a debatable issue. Granting children special permission is wrong in this matter. That should be clear to anybody, and saying these things should not make you transphobic in the eyes of the media or the masses. But unfortunately, that seems to be the reality of the situation. Now, legal experts told the Star the court decision meant parents would need to respect their children's chosen gender, pronouns, and name. It also set a precedent for transitioning youth across the province, suggesting that seeking medical assistance is a health decision and not a political or a moral one that a parent can stop. Now, first of all, that whole thing is littered in madness. The initial precedent is asinine. Parents just need to respect their children's chosen gender, pronoun, and name. So, one day, your kid comes home and feels like the opposite gender. They want to change their name and they do it. They tell you that they go from Marco to Marianne, and he wants you to refer to them as Your Majesty now for a pronoun because they're feeling like a royal female. You better bust out the hormone pills ASAP and shove them down their throat because it's a medical decision that they just made. This is the reductio ad absurdum, but we aren't far away from that. Obviously, it's a political and moral decision. What are they saying? How is that a health decision? This is not like needing a vaccine and your parents stopping you. But they want you to believe like it is. They are trying to conflate these two things as if it's the same situation, when clearly it's not. Now, when asked why they dropped the family violence charge on the father, the judge says this: the evidence suggests the father does not deliberately intend to harm his son. Obviously, you very silly judge, by telling his biological daughter, now it's a son, that they may be rushing into something that they're not ready for, isn't him trying to harm the child. You can easily make the case it's the opposite. You can very clearly say that he cares about his child and wants the best for them, and he feels that this course of action is not that. He cares about the well-being of his child and understands that they are 15 years old, about to change genders when they aren't even old enough to make any other responsible decisions for themselves. Seriously, we all need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are we really doing here? Things get even more ridiculous after that. The conduct order served to the father also prohibits him from expressing his opinion about his son's gender identity to the media or any public forum. Nice. How amazing is that? So now they shut up the father and take away his freedom of expression. Great work, judges. You're really solving humanity's issues here. These restrictions on the father's freedom of expression were supposedly imposed with the aim of preventing harm to his son. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and they should remember that. I'm sure that they fully believe the judges themselves, that they think that they are acting in the best way they can, showing sympathy, but that's not the same as doing what's logical. I too feel sympathy. The entire situation is messed up and will likely destroy that family, but normalizing this and encouraging children to shift genders at a whim is not the solution to any of the problems. Become an adult first, live a little, and then you can figure that out for yourself. Studies show a large portion of children who claim to be trans change their minds in the future. If you go all out right away, those kids will be in for a rude wake-up call when they realize that they played themselves. I really do worry for where society is heading in this regard. I am not opposed to people living how they want, as J.K. Rowling said in that controversial tweet that got her almost cancelled, but rulings like this are flat out insane. We can't even have open debates about the topic because it's all hate speech now, and thus, we will never progress. We are handed axioms and are expected to hold them as true, unwaveringly. Good ideas never stem from something like that. When we are not free to challenge a concept, to make it stronger by doing so, you settle for disastrous ideas that will lead society into a dark place. Some people will always revert to the defense that notions like this are simply alarmist and we're making a big deal out of nothing, but for a long time now, we've seen how society is shifting to these ideas. the court systems are completely backwards, as we can see in a ruling like this here. So, you better start taking it seriously, or the trend will continue to spiral out of control. If you think that granting children the ability to perform these procedures is the end of it, you're wrong. Now we'll have to see how things play out, but losing faith in the justice system is one byproduct of a ruling like this. I guarantee it's not going to sit too well with the populace because it's simply crazy. The average person, the silent majority, is not going to buy into that ideology. So, that now brings me to the end of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That'll help us grow. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Perri Platform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.